This is Ross Johnston, and you're listening to Accelerate Alaska, where we explore the competitive advantages, the systems, and the industries that move Alaska's future forward. This episode sponsored by...
This is Mike Ferris, President of Alaska Enterprise Solutions, the Xerox sales agency with offices in Anchorage and Fairbanks. Businesses who need a reliable supplier of quality office equipment turn to Alaska Enterprise Solutions. We provide multifunctional copiers, wide format printers, postage systems, and can handle all your scanning needs. And we provide professional support to keep things running smoothly. Let us show you how to reduce print costs with a free assessment. Alaska Enterprise Solutions in Midtown Anchorage, or visit aesalaska.com.
Coeur D'Alene, Idaho is not an Alaska town, but it may just provide the blueprint for one. This lake town has been known as a tourist destination for many years. But since 2013, the town has seen over 40 new startups, hundreds of new jobs, $34 million in capital deployed, and a 36,000 square foot innovation den housing over 50 companies developed out of an abandoned Elks Lodge. The reason? The Innovation Collective in Coeur D'Alene was founded in 2013 with the dream to create a system that allowed for normal people, like you and I, to participate in the technology revolution that is creating wealth in this world. This once sleepy town is now in the forefront of the AI and robotics industry. So what can Alaska do in order to replicate Coeur d'Alene's success? Chris Cochran, the COO of the Innovation Collective, shared his insights during a panel discussion that was facilitated by John Bittner of the SBDC.
One of the things that they wanted us to talk about are what kind of innovation should we expect here and what maybe isn't quite as reasonable? Or is there anything that isn't reasonable? Should we go for it all?
I really don't think there's a specific thing that Alaska should be focused on yet, in the sense that, we want to talk about tourism economies, or we want to talk about oil economies, or all these different things. And I think that, honestly, the truth is Alaska could focus on anything it wanted to and have a successful economy. Anything. We jokingly say all the time, Innovation Collective, I could take an entire community and focus them on the future of hair and make billions of dollars. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Imagine a society where young people from the time they're in school until old people who are in nursing homes are thinking about the future of the hair product industry. How do we regenerate hair for people who are losing it? How do we make sure that the hair that the products we're using on our hair aren't causing damage to our earth? And how do we use those things to imagine a society that's focused on anything? Hospitality, hair, space, anything. And I think that one of the things that you touched on that I think is very, very important is one of the very first things that Alaska should be focused on is the leadership that's going to actually say we're going to be focused on something of the future rather than trying to hold on to ancient systems and ancient ways of doing things that have brought us where we are today, and all of those were valuable. But they're not going to be the things that change and lead us into the future as technology changes and as the democratization of that technology changes. So my answer would be it doesn't really matter what Alaska focuses on as long as there is a focus in Alaska and it's an authentic and genuine expression of the people who live here. And one of the things we did in Coeur d'Alene early on was we looked at the history of what went on there. And it turns out that we had this major manufacturing base there, and 4 different AI companies started in Coeur d'Alene back in the 80s, which sounds bizarre. In fact, one of the largest libraries of chatbots was just made public domain by one of the companies that started in Coeur d'Alene, now is in Spokane. And so we said, hey, with this history here, why wouldn't we focus a community on being a community of robotics and AI? And we'll do something different in other cities we've worked with, but for there it was an authentic expression of what had come out of there originally and what we'd always done there. And we were able to take that grit of North Idahoans like you guys have here in Alaska and go, can't we start doing something that is focused and create an entire research and development hub in a community that people from the outside want to take notice of?
As a bald guy, I'm 100% behind the hair innovation industry. I think, I know this is Ross's party, but if we can just shift the whole focus
to hair.
I'm just saying, I would be a client. Anyway, so I want to sort of build off of what you were just talking about there for a second. I've often thought that, there's only 700,000 people here, right? So any market share we capture inside the state is by its very nature going to be difficult to scale if the state is the market. Does it make sense for us to look at where our pain point, like a lot of the innovation is driven by, problems or inefficiencies that you have locally, and cross-reference that or create a Venn diagram of what our pain points are and what other large-scale or emerging markets pain points are, and see, hey, the healthcare situation in rural Alaska has some similarities to the problems they're having in India or China, or our providing transportation or logistics to services to a large geographic area with underdeveloped infrastructure. Well, we can think of other countries that have that issue. When it comes to food security, who else has these issues? And it may not be the markets that we necessarily associate with. I mean, India is in the middle of a very large-scale electrical grid upgrade, or at least they're trying to figure out how to do that, but it's a massive project, trillions of dollars to recreate the current system, whereas maybe a more localized microgrid system or some sort of hybrid system might make more sense, and we're kind of at the forefront of that just by our very nature. Is that worth looking at, or is it more that we should just let this happen organically? Is it an intentful trying to find that thing that we can do authentically, or where somebody at the top or some innovation community comes forward and says, look, this is the criteria by which we should filter our efforts? Or is it just sort of throw everything against the wall and see what sticks naturally?
I would posit that, somebody has to make that decision in the sense that we've been doing it organically in society and communities all across our country, and we have to have conferences like this because of that. I mean, this exists not because everything's so hunky-dory here. There's a lot of problems people are trying to figure out here, not only just in Alaska and in Anchorage, but in, Deloitte and in Casper, Wyoming, and all around the country, everywhere but the coast and the major metropolitan areas. We have this issue, and we've been trying to be organic as long as we possibly can, and until leadership steps up and says, here's the direction we're going to go. And part of the problem is human beings are designed to work within framework. And an example I use all the time is if I were to ask you guys to come up with a science fair project, everybody would come up with a volcano, right? What would be the first thing we would think of is the volcano. But if I were to ask everyone in this room to come up with a science fair project that a high school or middle schooler could do that revolved around mobility for the elderly, in 10 minutes you could all come up with 4 of them that are really, really cool. Because we are designed as human beings to think within framework. And that doesn't mean you can't ever think outside the framework. In fact, some of the greatest innovations have come from people who think outside the framework. But if we're talking about ecosystems and talking about building a culture here like you were talking about, it has to start with giving human beings some kind of framework with which to think, because if you don't, they are thinking bigger. And just to kind of expand a second point on what you were saying, even using the phrase the lower 48 isolates you and is an us versus them mentality. And guess what? We live in a global society. The people in Pakistan have as much access to information as you do. And if you think they don't want to steal your ideas and innovate around you, you're sadly mistaken. A young lady was admitted to MIT last year. MIT. From Pakistan, who was robbed of the chance of an education because she was a girl. And so she enrolled in Khan Academy and entered into MIT as a freshman because she has the internet in a hut. If you don't think that you have global competition here and you're not thinking outside the boundaries of your state, you will tend to continue an attrition rate where people are going to leave, talent's going to leave, resources are going to leave, and the same things are going to happen here. And I'm not saying this because it's some weird threat, because it's Alaska. I watched this happen in communities in North Idaho. And we thought, man, we were pulling so much silver out of the ground. This is amazing. Guess what? Oil is going to stop being used as a primary form of currency in the world. It is. And if your economy is forever going to be based on the consumption of oil in China, what happens when electric vehicles take that over? You're looking at a huge crash. And so to answer your question, yes, leadership needs to do something. And it doesn't have to be the same thing for everybody. But someone at some point's got to go, hey guys, this is the direction we're going. Who wants to come?
Well, that kind of leads nicely into sort of the next question I wanted to get into. So there's two sort of major institutions that I think of when I think of folks that have the resources, but not necessarily the flexibility, the innovative culture. And that's the state government here, and to a lesser extent, the university as a whole. So these are large-scale institutions that I think could play a major role in this, but maybe not. And what does that look like in your mind? Like, is it their role to lead? Is it their role to facilitate, to support, to develop programs that help whoever ends up being the person to stand up and say, let's go this way?
I think the answer to your question is yes. There has to be public-private partnerships. It always has to be that way. And one of the things that is changing, and if the local, I'm not familiar with the local university here, but one thing I know that like University of Idaho has dealt with is education is changing. I sat in a panel with a bunch of leaders from upstate New York who are trying to revitalize their economy there. And one of them said, we've got to get young people more information. And I about lost my mind. I'm like, no, we don't need more information. Every bit of information we've ever needed is at our fingertips right now. I was an IT professional for years, and people would be like, how do you know all of this? And I'm like, I Google it. I can't know everything. I just can't. And so we don't need more information. And so so when it comes to education, we have to be educating differently, and we have to actually be putting job-ready skills in front of people, which is the part of the problem with the current way that we do education in our society is learning and higher education institutions cannot fail. They cannot follow an entrepreneurial model, because the minute they fail, they have to admit they don't know everything. And if you're the keeper of all knowledge, then you can't fail and you can't not know anything, because then you lose credibility. And then who wants to go to your college when a professor stands up and goes, we don't really know how any of this works. So because of that, there has to be a partnership between private, public, education, and the government. The problem is many times, and this is another, and I'm presenting a lot of problems, not a lot of solutions, but there are some solutions we can talk about later. The way that government works in America is also flawed in this, because the majority of terms for local politicians and local from the outside of the national level down. So you take governors, you take mayors, you take council members, all those things. Their impetus and their goal is to get reelected, and their goal is, I can't make too many waves, because if I piss off too many people, I won't get reelected. And that's not a reflection even on poor values. It's just the way the system works. So name the last time a mayor stood up and said, everyone in this town's going to hate me, but we're going to do this because in 10 years, promise me, you will thank me. It doesn't happen. And the reason is because we have to change the way that we elect officials, or we got to have some officials that can actually do something. How long does your congressional term here last?
On the state?
No. Like, how long is the actual Congress where they're actually like passing laws?
Oh, theoretically 3 months, realistically.
It's 90 days in Idaho. So help me understand this. Why would I spend any time at all running for an office where I'm going to work 3 months out of the year for $40,000 if I actually have done anything successful in my life? What a waste of freaking time. And so if that's the way that we're going to operate, then yeah, there's got to be change in those things, or else we're going to end up with the exact same thing we've been getting for the last 50 years.
Of all the suggestions, that one's not the most controversial. I think getting us to stop saying the lower 48 is probably the most impossible thing you've suggested so far. Second only to just getting rid of the PFD. No, it's good. That's good. All right. So we are coming up. We've got about 5-ish minutes left. And I know I said we were going to do a Q&A, but I really want to I want to end this on one high note, an optimistic sort of vision for the future. So forgive me. I'd like you to say what your vision of, all right, let's say that whatever hurdles, whatever barriers there are, we've overcome them. We've jumped into the innovation pool with both feet, and it's been successful. What does that look like to you? What does that mean for Alaska? Like, let's project it out 10, 20 years in the future, and everything went right, and we did exactly what we needed to do. What picture do you see in your head when you look at that? And you can be as specific or as broad as you want, but I mean, what does success here feel like?
As an outsider's perspective, I would like to see Alaska become known as not just an overall ecosystem, but centralized hubs of excellence in specific things. It would be awesome to see communities like Nome and Fairbanks and Juneau be places that other parts of the world look at as that crazy place in Alaska where they're all focused on this crazy thing. Can you believe that? And that those communities, success to me would look like kids growing up in school and being able to understand that they don't have to go somewhere else to be successful and live out their dreams. They can do that right here, and they can make an affordable living here, and they can actually build something. And if they don't like it in Fairbanks, they can actually just go over to Juneau, because there's something there going on that is more along their likings. And if they don't like it there, they can actually go to Anchorage, because there's something even cooler there. And that the education system, that alternative education, and that all those things are working together to build an ecosystem of innovation here, that every single one of those communities go, here's where we're going, and we're building on a foundation that's still going to be here 25 or 30 years from now. The technologies that we're working on today are ones that you were talking about from the ground up, from their kids through elderly. I mean, I guess that would be it too, that young people and old people would be working together to build new technologies that didn't exist 10 years ago. That'd be amazing. That would be success to me.
If you want to see the full panel discussion with answers from Anand Vadapalli from ACS and Thomas Holder from Siri, go to accelerateak.com. So what mindset is needed in order to turn a sleepy town like Coeur d'Alene into an industrial hub? We join Chris Cochran on stage during the innovation track.
Good morning. My presentation is going to be a little different because I have a very different take on economic development. The group that I work with in Coeur d'Alene is called the Innovation Collective. And what we do there is slightly different than anything anyone else is doing, actually, to be honest with you. And I want to talk to you this morning about innovating or dying as it pertains to communities. It's a very, very interesting thing because all around the world right now, magic is really taking place. We're seeing crazy innovations happen that have never happened before. And it's things that in the past would have literally looked like black magic. I love the fact that my daughter lives in Stockholm, Sweden, and I see her face to face and talk to her every single day on something that's made out of lightning and sand. That's magic. And it's happening all around the world. We're seeing crazy things happen around the world that we never would have dreamed of, including things like, I got a short video here that I wanted to show you. I have a good friend. His name is Johnny Matheny. He's the world's first robo-human being. He has a prosthetic arm that he can control with his mind. It literally takes the thoughts of his mind and controls them. And he learned in the last year to play the piano using a prosthetic arm that he controls with his mind. He did this with Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. Super cool guy, really cool. We just had him at one of our conferences. This is magic. I mean, think about that for a second. The second part of this is a bread robot. It's a company that we work with in Coeur d'Alene. They've literally revolutionized the bread industry. I can tell you about bread economics, stuff I didn't even know like years ago about bread economics, and they're changing the way that bread is made in the United States. And this is a little picture of a Waymo car and how Waymo sees the world. Magic is taking place, and this new wave of technology is changing the way that we perceive the world. It's changing the way we communicate. It's changing all kinds of crazy stuff. And this new wave is absolutely taking on things that we never dreamed possible. We just recently had a big conference last weekend that we celebrate robotics and AI in Coeur d'Alene because we picked that as a technology vertical for our town. And we've said we're going to be the best damn technology around robotics and AI, and we're going to be a center of that, and our whole community is going to be involved in it. And so we have this big festival once a year where we celebrate that. And at the festival, we had a gentleman by the name of David Blodgett. David Blodgett is the chief scientist for Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory for their telepathic typing program. Now, they don't call it that. There's a technical name for it. But literally what they're doing, they're building ways for people to type using only their mind. They're doing this in conjunction with Facebook, and he came and he talked about this project that they're working on. Think about that. That is black magic. It's crazy. It's nonsense. Who would have ever thought that in our lifetimes, somebody would actually be working on the ability to think, and it would just type it into our computers? This new wave of technology is actually taking over many of the things that we've traditionally taken for granted, many of the different industries that we've taken for granted, and we're seeing new waves of technology change communication, work, thinking. All of it is being transformed. And it's a fantastic time to be alive. Oh my gosh, it is such a great time to be alive. But there's also a darker side of this technology. There's a darker side of the wave that's coming, and it's doing a disservice to many communities who are focusing on traditional ways of doing economic development. We have watched automation and AI in our lifetimes take away jobs. And according to different studies, depending on which one you listen to, up to 47% of jobs as we know them will be automated out of existence. If your title is driver, you need to be retrained. You're not going to have a job. And I know in rural Alaska, it may seem like that's a few years off, but let me tell you, I've watched autonomous vehicles in little Coeur d'Alene, Idaho being used. If your title is accountant, guess what? I use QuickBooks. I use Intuit. I don't even need an accountant for basic things. And that's with simple web-based stuff. Imagine when AI gets a hold of that. If your title is judge, you may actually be out of a job in the next 10 to 15 years. Back east, there is a courtroom that has had an AI running next to a judge for the last 18 months. And that AI is now in 85% agreement with all of the rulings of the judge. And you have to ask yourself, would you rather have a judge who can be swayed by emotion, can be swayed by the facial movements that you have or the body language that you have, or would you rather have an impartial AI that just looks at the facts and makes a decision based on the facts? This wave is coming. And if we're not prepared for it, our communities are going to start suffering. Our communities are going to start hurting, and our communities are going to need to reinvent themselves. And we have a saying we like to use at Innovation Collective. This new wave is coming, and you have two options. You can either try to stand and hold the ground that you've been holding for the last several decades and watch this wave come at you. And I don't know if you've ever been in giant waves, like 6-foot tall waves at the beach, but the sand starts to erode out from underneath you. And you finally find yourself being plummeted by this giant wave. And you don't even know it hit you oftentimes. Even when you can see it coming, you can't even see it coming. Or you can do like we suggest, which is catch that wave, ride it, and have a little bit of fun. There's a new way to build economies. There's a new way to build cities. There's a new way to extract value from the earth. There's a new way to extract minerals. There's a new way to do all kinds of crazy things we've never thought of before. Did you know that this is a place where we extract things from the ground, right? We do that in Idaho too. We have a whole valley that's called the Silver Valley, and traditionally it was all built on mining. Did you know that the School of Mines in Colorado just started a major in asteroid mining? Now think about that for a second. There has to be new ways of doing things that we've never done before, or else we are going to find ourselves in a position where the wave is crashing around us and our communities are maybe not going to die, but they're going to be severely hurting. There is a new way to build economies, and it's something that we've been working on in a crazy little town in North Idaho. And this new way of building economies uses a non-traditional approach to building economies. We like to work with people first, not programs, not giant buildings, not like structure. And we like to work with people first. And we like to teach people to think nonsensically. Because every major technological advancement in the history of our world was nonsense when it was first introduced. Telepathic typing? That's crazy. David Bloggett's working on it. Electricity? Taking the magic in the air and putting in people's houses? What about the ethers? Nonsense. But every major technological advancement that we've ever seen that changed the world came from nonsensical ideas. And we believe that when you can take communities of people and train them how to think nonsensically and encourage them to think nonsensically and put them in environments where they can learn to grow together and then give them a position where they can predispose themselves to building companies on their own, you will start changing local economies. Local communities need to start reevaluating their resources and what they have on hand in the same way that a human being would do. If I dropped you on a desert island, the very first thing you would ask is, all right, what do I have? What are my resources? And the first thing that we need to do as local economies is start thinking about what are the resources that we have at hand. Because corporations are beginning to collapse. They're collapsing in on themselves when it comes to innovation. They don't have the ideas they used to. When was the last time a company came out with something you're like, holy cow? It's been a while. Megacities are starting to collapse. I just moved from Seattle, Washington, and I can tell you all kinds of things. You can watch the city, as successful as it's been, as rich as people are getting, as difficult as things are becoming. It's starting to collapse on itself. And these mega corporations and these mega cities are now looking outside of those corporations. They're looking outside of themselves. They're looking outside of the major cities and the mega cities because they need to find innovation in unlikely areas. If you think that Facebook doesn't know everything going on in Silicon Valley, Austin, Seattle, New York, you're crazy. There's nothing hidden there. There's no stealthy companies. The only things that are stealth are what they're putting in the news. But let me tell you about things that are going on in small towns like Coeur D'Alene, Idaho, or Butte, Montana, or Casper, Wyoming, or Anchorage. There are crazy people thinking nonsensical ideas and building technologies that are now becoming the foundation for major industries. And if you think I'm making this up, I can introduce you to multi-million-dollar companies that came out of Coeur d'Alene in the last 10 years. In fact, most of them in the last 5 years, who are just crazy dudes or women in their yards and in their garages going, I think I could build something. And nobody told them they couldn't. They didn't know they couldn't. All they didn't know how to do was to turn that into a real corporation. So we work with corporations, with individuals like that by taking an entire community and we team them up together and we build together. And we have a saying we like to use. We like to build wolves, not unicorns. Because see, wolves are scrappy. They run in packs. They take down things together. They work together. Unicorns are a mythical creature that doesn't exist. And you know what? It's very interesting because most wolves that are lone wolves die of malnutrition. And we believe that when we can start taking societies communities and building together really inclusive communities who want to work together, who want to build together, who've been encouraged to create and dream and do more for their economies and do more for themselves. And the democratization of information has made that possible. And when we encourage people to build, create, and do, we will change local economies, even like Anchorage. And I'll just leave you with this. Cities like Anchorage, cities like Coeur d'Alene, we can rest on our laurels. Tourism, healthcare, mineral extraction, we did the same thing there. Or we can start creating societies of people who've been encouraged and pushed to dream and build and do. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you want to see the presentation with slides and visuals, go to accelerateak.com. Do you enjoy this podcast? If so, go to accelerateak.com to find out how you can contribute, volunteer, or even bring an Accelerate conference to your town. accelerateak.com. This has been an Accelerate LLC production. The future is already here, if you know where to look.